Welcome to Women Leading AI from Ambition to Scalable Value. This conversation is part of CGI's Women in Tech series. I'm your host, Derek Marinos, and today we're taking a closer look at what separates AI experimentation from measurable business value. I'm joined by three CGI leaders operating at the center of that question and beyond. Dr. Diane Gutiw is based in British Columbia and co-chairs the Government of Canada's AI Advisory Council. She also advises policymakers in Canada, the United Kingdom, and the European Union on AI legislation and responsible AI standards. Christina Fung is based in Toronto, leading CGI's Global Enablement Center of Excellence, where she drives the company's mandate on operationalizing responsible AI for clients worldwide. And Annette Farinaccio is based in Montreal, where she leads business consulting, AI strategy, and transformation for Greater Montreal. With more than 25 years of experience, she helps organizations navigate complex transformation with strategic vision, people-centered leadership, and disciplined execution. Three different altitudes on the same question. It's an honor to be with you all, and welcome to the program.
Hey, Derek, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Derek.
Yeah, wonderful
Thanks,
to be with you. Before we get into specifics, I want to start with a State of the Union from the panel and specifically what you're hearing and what you're seeing. Let's begin with Diane.
Yeah, it's been an interesting evolution, and why I'm so excited to be here with Christina and Annette. We're really seeing the business side merging so tightly with technology. And that's what we're seeing. The technology is evolving at pace. A lot of organizations have shifted from large language models and rolling out just tools to really digging into what is this agentic thing and how do we leverage it in our organizations to solve problems, which I think is brilliant. But the moving to value-based implementations at scale is not just a technology problem anymore. And that's the shift we're seeing. A lot of the opportunities when we're working with our clients, a lot of the challenges to shift from pilot into scalable, value-led production implementations of these things is a business problem, as well as looking at how do we leverage this technology and where do we leverage it to support humans rather than just replace us? Where do we all fit? Which again is a change management, user experience, business process engineering challenge that relies on a new technology that we're learning, building the airplane as we fly it. So it's a really fascinating place to be right now. We're seeing some amazing things come out with the tools and the technologies that are enabling us. And every day of the week, if you ask me, I think I have a different favorite new feature or tool that's come out.
Wonderful, thank you. Christina.
So I think it's a very interesting moment that I call it a little bit like a messy middle right now. I think the industry finally get over the initial hurdle of hype. So there was a lot of hype. I think enterprises really figure it out, saying that what is real, what is not, and now proceeding into the reality of execution. And we see a lot of enterprises really focusing on and doing very well in enabling individual productivity, giving out tools to people and using AI to generate contents, using AI for code assistance, for example, or Copilot in different areas. So in that regard, those ones are low barrier of cost of entry and what I call the quick wins. And I think across the board have been doing quite well. The area that really needs to be now going to the execution side is on scaling. Scaling is very important for any transformation to happen meaningfully. And some obstacles typically for this type of transformation, what we are seeing is data readiness. If you don't really have a good structured and organized data and they are in siloed, that is your barrier. Do you have a federated model that is solid foundation for responsible use of AI so that you can scale rapidly? Other areas such as, do you have a platform? And when technology changes so rapidly, it is quite confusing and difficult to pick the right platform actually to do it globally across different countries, geographies, and industry. And last but not least, if you are trying to AI-enabled a legacy workflow, that's really also leaving the money at the table and also really challenging to actually even implement it. I think the most important questions Diane also touched on is around value, ROI. Measuring AI value is very different than what CFO or other leaders, P&L leaders, measuring typical investments and return on investments. So the value on investments, the time to value also becomes quite a new thing for every company to adopt.
That's very interesting. And we're going to touch on value a little later in the program and scale as well. And thank you for that, Christina. Now over to Annette Farinaccio.
Okay, you got it right this time. Thanks, Derek.
I did. Thank you.
I've been leading transformation in industry and consulting for a good part of my career. I have to say we are in a step change. This is the first wave of transformation where IT, who has been historically the enabler of change, is also being transformed at the same time, I would say. So are consulting firms. When we look at AI transformation, it is more about redesigning how organizations think, work, and create value at all levels in the organization. And it is less about deploying new technology, it is quite exciting, the new technology. But the big shift is from efficiency focus to autonomy and new operating models. So we're really attacking change at an operating model level, both in business, in technology, and in consulting. And so change is evolving at an unprecedented pace. So it requires all of us to step up. But when you step back and you look at transformation for what it is, the fundamentals on what drives success remains the same. Leadership alignment, culture, process redesign, data quality, governance, scaling adoption beyond pilots are all key to success. And underpinning all that is going to be organizational change management.
Thank you for that. Diane, from your vantage point, what's genuinely new right now, and what signals should business leaders be paying attention to that they may be actually missing?
Yeah, I think what's new, I think we've touched on it a lot there. What's new is you're not going to get the scalable value just by throwing tools at people. You will get value. People will start to shift into an innovative, how can I use this? But you're not going to get a consistent standard approach to how do we leverage this tool in our day-to-day work with just providing the tools. So to what Annette was just saying, I think what's new and what organizations are recognizing is governance is more critical than ever. Their data is truly their organizational IP and their gold and their talent. A recognition that, we really need to look at who are the people that are going to be able to drive this. And again, it's not just the computer scientists or the data scientists. It's what's the business context? What's the intent of what we're doing? And how do we bring that into the tools in order to get the output we want? So, that's what I'm seeing as the shift is, okay, we've played with the tools. Organizations have created some cool RAG models to look at their documents, which, and query their information. But the shift is now understanding in order to truly scale it, we need to rethink how we work.
Good point. And Christina, what's the real state of enterprise AI right now? Where are organizations making progress, and where are they still getting stuck?
I think a lot of times where we are seeing is companies right now, if they are still treating responsible use of AI is just a gate and a rubber stamp, I think they are missing a big point. And it cannot be afterthoughts. Similar to what Annette mentioned, it requires everybody to step up. Like, it is not just around you produce a RAG model, you build an application, you try to get your security team, your data privacy team for approval and things like that. It really needs to be embedded in everybody's role. And you need to have an overall policy, which is the highest level of standard. So such as in CGI, where we have presence across 40 countries, we picked the highest denomination for the standard. And that's federated globally. And then we allow different groups, different regions, different industries to adopt it. So I think that really what makes a difference and can be the acceleration is you need to have that in your DNA and embed it in everybody's role and helping them to understand how it actually works and allowing a global guardrail to be in place and individual personas to actually work very effectively. So that I think that will really help bridging the gap and accelerating the adoption.
I really appreciate the word guardrail and governance. I think this is really important, and I want to move on to our next segment right now, which is taking a closer look at what responsible AI actually requires. And I'd love for this next segment to see if we can make it a little more concrete. And Diane, I'd love to begin with you here. And what does responsible AI actually require technically, operationally, and from a policy standpoint? And where's the biggest gap between the policy conversation and business reality?
Yeah, and in 2 sentences, right? To make it's not concrete. And I'm going to start with that. We saw a huge announcement come out from the Canadian government and privacy commissioners across a number of provinces yesterday looking at the privacy implications and stating we need to rethink our privacy, right? So as the technology evolves, the safeguards are also evolving. However, what we need to do is we really need to manage 4 types of risks. The first type of risk is we need to protect ourselves from bad actors, both through oversight and vigilance and regulation, as well as investing in research for how we can detect false images, false documents, and be able to support people in understanding and reliably being able to assess the outputs of tools and what's being posted and what's in the media. We really need to focus on protecting ourselves from bad actors. That's one. The next is we need to have a better understanding across our citizenship, across the users, on what the tool is. The risk is the risk of misunderstanding. And there's 2 extremes. We've got the extreme of fear. And you and I have talked about the media is not helping us with this because it's exciting to think about the fear. It's engaging. People jump on board, but we really need to step back and say, what are these tools? What are they not? And the other side of that coin is the over-reliance, AI therapists, AI boyfriends, like starting to see these as true advisors rather than just auto text for thought, which is what it is at this point. So AI literacy is absolutely critical. The next is the risk of misuse. We need guardrails and guidelines for what we should and should not put into these tools. We need to have transparency to understand where our information is going and where it's coming from, and we need to do that better. And setting the guardrails, at the policy level, at the user level, and within organizations is critical. And it's not just what data I use, it's where is it appropriate to use this. And the biggest risk to me right now is the risk of missed opportunity. Because if we can constrain those other risks, the opportunity of AI for good to improve our health outcomes, improve our life-work balance. We're not seeing a shift yet for people losing jobs. We're seeing people getting their evenings and weekends back. It's the highly monotonous, laborious going to look for tasks that can be done so that we as humans can use our ingenuity to do and work to our skill levels. And that's where we're at with the tools right now, and that's the missed opportunity.
That's really interesting. Quality of life, and how do we move north there, and how do we deliver better services and just be better at what we're doing right now? I think solving problems, and you're right.
Yeah,
you and I battle.
So I don't think I gave you that tangible 2-sentence answer, but in order to leverage the good of these tools, we need to set those guardrails, and we need to set them so everybody understands and protect ourselves from the things that we shouldn't have to worry about in a technology ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's vital. And if it goes 2 paragraphs, 2 pages, or 2 books, it needs to get there, and it needs to arrive at a good spot. Thank you very much, Diane. Christina, now that we can look a little bit at how organizations try to put some of those principles, into practice across markets, client environments, and regulatory regimes. What does it actually really take?
I think to further elaborate on what Diane just mentioned, so the guardrails, it needs to be at the enterprise level, and it need to be covering different areas of needs. And I think it's really bring it to the execution level. What it means is we need to have an interdisciplinary approach. Organizations cannot have silos of security, data privacy, and compliance risk. They are all working independently. And I think the first thing is it needs to have that mindset of it is for the business. It's just like running a business every single day. We need to have the experts from each of these departments or area of expertise sitting at the table and talking about what should be that policy that needs to be in place, and also monitoring how it's being executed in different geographies. And also back to what Annette mentioned, it is a transformation. It is both IT and business together going hand in hand. And in order to understand regulatory that is specific for geographies and for industries, you do need that collaboration, because IT people probably won't know what is really happening for a banking industry or healthcare or in particular geographies, and vice versa. You can have business expertise, business experts knowing manufacturing very well, but don't quite understand what does it mean when building the solutions together. So I think that really, really resonates actually quite nicely, that while AI helping us to expedite the execution of work, we actually need to strengthen how people actually work together much more closely, collaboratively. So the interdisciplinary approach I mentioned in terms of governing AI governance, and in terms of coming up with the responsible use of AI solutions, I think that's important. Want to touch on and piggyback on what Diane mentioned, the human aspects of that there's a human benefits. There's also companies benefit in a way of with the guardrail and the AI approach. Guardrails is not supposed to pull you back. With the right guardrail in place, I hope all the leaders here recognizing it actually helps you to accelerate and scale much more rapidly. It's a good thing. AI governance is not like bad police. AI governance is there to help you accelerate your transformation. And so that everybody's jobs can actually make it easier. And I think one impact people probably not talking much about is AI also helps a company to be stronger, to actually pivot when there are bad times and good times and turmoils, and be more agile, and also make business decisions much more quickly and much better informed. And executives able to make the right business decisions at the right time is extremely critical for enterprises to grow and exist in the coming years.
Very interesting, and timing is vital for a business, and especially for market options too. Annette, from the transformation side, where do responsible AI principles actually show up in the work? Are they built into the program from the start, or do they still get layered in at the end?
So I agree with Christina and Diane that responsible AI is a topic that needs to be addressed at the enterprise level holistically, and then trickle down into the organization. So when you're dealing with a transformation, you shouldn't be dealing with it in pockets or in a vacuum. There should be overall guiding principles at the organizational level. Today, the responsible AI principles are often introduced too late. They often show up after the pilots are underway. They show up as governance, legal, and compliance checkpoints, but really, to your point, Derek, they should be integrated into the overall transformation program early on at the beginning, and integrated into the delivery, and not just as an ethics layer, because things like bias, security, and trust will affect adoption and business value. So, but does need to be an overarching guidance happening holistically at the enterprise level.
Thank you very much, Annette. Before we continue with our next segment, just a mention to everybody here who's listening. Thank you, first of all, for joining us. But more importantly, there's an opportunity to ask questions with our experts here. Please feel free to engage with the chat and fire one in. And we'd love to share some of your questions with Christina, Diane, and Annette. There is a question from Frederick. And the question is, how do you avoid an uncontrolled agent sprawl across an enterprise? Diane, would you like to take that?
I know who Fred is. So if Frederick, if you're the one that I know, it's an interesting question, and it comes down to governance, right? You need to have oversight. You need to understand, first of all, what is the purpose for deploying an agent and what are they doing, and constrain them within that environment. We've talked, and Annette and I have talked a lot recently about it's not just enabling the users and understanding. This is, I love saying this one, we are the last generation of people managing only people. We need to train and upskill our managers into how to do oversight for their agent ecosystems, because they're now not just responsible for the outputs, the work products of their people. They're responsible for the work products and outputs and processes and behaviors of the agents. So how do I avoid sprawl? We should never get to that point, because we should understand what it is that our tools are doing, what's the context, and have oversight and a process in place that we're monitoring, no different than monitoring a group of co-op students. I use that example all the time. I think these technologies are at the co-op student. You have some that are excellent, some that are struggling, and some that are there till they can get to the next term of their studies and need to be upskilled more. And like a group of interns or co-op students or new grads, you need to leverage their brilliance where it fits and provide them the guidance on how they can bring value to your organization. It's the same with agents. I don't know, Christine, I'm going to pass the ball to you, because I think you probably have been looking at this one a bit too.
I don't know what else I can add more with such a great answer. And I think since we're talking about digital agents, and I would just add at the last mile is there needs to be a platform to enable it in place. Just like if it is human workers, and you will have a process of how you monitor the work performance and the scope and educate the human. So I think when we are dealing with digital agents, then we do need to have a mechanic such as a platform, some type of a technology platform, allowing us to monitor much more effectively and efficiently.
Wonderful. Thank you. One more question from the audience, and Diane, this one I think will be right in your wheelhouse. How are we managing fault tolerance in multi-agents?
Yeah, and it's similar to the first question. We really need to understand what these tools are supposed to do, and we need to build in quality agents, oversight agents, so that we can raise up as early in any agentic process or multi-agent working in an ecosystem process, what those outputs are. Because if you think of software development, for example, if I have an agentic solution that's going to take my requirements, create my design, develop my code, if I'm not checking that the requirements are correct, that error flows into my design. If I'm not checking my design is incorrect, it flows into my code. No different than when we worked on software development purely human-based, right? With agentic solutions, because these things can be very quick. The problem could be you can have an error at the beginning that flows through if we don't have that oversight, human in the loop. I'm tired of that expression, but human oversight, human interaction, collaboration, and what these are doing. On the flip side, it's a great tool to make sure you have the quality, because if you get the requirements right, the design should be more robust and you have an automatic check. And if you get the design right, it should flow in, so there's some automation benefits in this as well. But oversight, governance, and only use agents where it makes sense, as well as don't reinvent the wheel, right? If someone's created an agent that works and is tested, make it available for other people. That's going to save your consumption costs. It's going to save on the risk of errors. It's just a best practice well outside of the world of AI.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for the question, Rayani. I'd like to move on to our next block and tackle bias, fairness, inclusion, and AI's impact on society. Love to explore where bias enters AI systems, how AI is reshaping opportunity and inclusion in the workforce, and what meaningful organizational action looks like beyond rhetoric. And Diane, I'd like to come back to you. When bias appears in AI, where does it most often enter the system, and what do organizations need to do to protect against it?
Yeah, with bias, we can lean on, again, our best practices for any time we're getting answers out of data and use research best practices. So with bias, there's a lot of misunderstanding that means all of the data that trains these models needs to be 50% male, 50% female, 50%, look at diversity across and have an even spread. And that's not necessarily the case. What we want to do is make sure that the data that these models are trained on is going to provide a representative, correct, reliable answer to the population it's serving. So in traditional AI, if I was doing a research study on men over the age of 60 that have diabetes and cardiac problems and look for a screening program, I'm not going to pull women into my training model because my target audience is men. And that's a very extreme example. So if we look at data science, making sure that the data is appropriate to the problem statement and is appropriately matched and masked and represented throughout the training of the model is one. The second place we have to look at bias is in the model itself. A traditional data science, if we have a biased model, you will get a skewed result. We need to have a model that's running the data in a way that it's looking at answering the question. And no two models are the same. We need to also think of that. So when we think about bias, we think about lack of fairness. Is this fair to me? Where that goes to your question is it a model problem because the model has not been trained on the right information to give you a reliable answer? Or is this a data problem where, the data from the outset has not looked at it? And again, with these black box solutions that we're looking at now, the GPTs, Geminis, Claudes, Perplexities, you don't have a lot of transparency into what the model's been trained on. But if you switch your thinking to using these large language models as a service, rather than just a query and response question and answer tool, and you narrow that down on your own data, your own organization, you then can influence where it's getting its answers from. And it's just a service that's able to generate, to locate, to provide reasoning and logic into. And that's how we're starting to manage that, is make sure that the information it's allowed to respond from is representative, again, of what it is you're trying to answer and who's the population you're serving.
Really interesting perspective there, Diane. A proper pathway is what we're looking for.
It's just good old data science best practices and good research best practices.
Back to fundamentals. Annette, from your perspective and journey in building, a diverse workforce, how is AI reshaping opportunity, inclusion, and the future of work too?
So I started my career in IT a while ago, and I was only one of three in computer science at the time. Things have definitely changed since then. We see a lot more diversity in tech. But AI is reshaping the opportunity. It's giving us increased access to knowledge tools that we never had, productivity capabilities, things that were once limited to specialized roles and technical expertise are now broadly available to everyone. So I do think with AI, it's actually increasing the ability for a more diverse workforce. What's key is that we invest in AI inclusive governance, that we invest in workforce reskilling, and that we give access equitably to the broader organization.
Wonderful, thank you. And Christina, what does responsible bias management actually look like in practice, and how can organizations move beyond performative language toward real accountability and impact?
I like the term bias management. It sounds so cool, by the way. So I think it's moving beyond the performative language. It's really around turning intent into measurable outcomes. And through that, the catalyst is around execution. So if we just keep on talking and talking about the intent, we should do this, we should do that, that's great as a starting point, but that doesn't really get to where we want to be. So the measurable outcomes becomes important, and also how you get there becomes the art of doing that. So I would say three things. One is the continuous auditing, that's the accountability of that. I know we do great work, many people focusing on how to put an AI solution into production, but there is actually a lot more responsibility after you go to production about. And so, for example, the data drift, the new behavior of your AI systems, it actually takes effort and accountability to do that. So people's accountability doesn't end when you go production. AI accountability is ongoing. So that's number one, to make it real. Number two, to make it real is around putting the right people in that monitoring team. And Diane mentioned around, a lot of times it's not just gender, it's not just race. And you need to have data science, you need to have scientists, you need to have people looking into the outcome and verify them. And these people should come from a diverse background. And for example, cognitive background, and for example, different industry background. And so these will really help identifying if there's any biases, if there's any drift in your data, any unplanned behavior is that surfacing. Typically, it surfaces after your application go live, because models logically they degrade themselves through time. So the AI ops parts becomes very important. Last but not least, please put in a kill switch. Please put in an escalation protocol in place, because we don't want, when things identify things not as expected, you need to go through the bureaucracy or panic attack of what to do with that. So make sure that accountability also means hope for the best, but plan for the worst, and have that escalation protocol, and everybody knows what to do when there's unexpected events happen.
That's sound advice, and many television producer, page one of the playbook, hope for the best, but definitely have many plans for the worst, because that is what you're likely going to see. Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Let's move on to our next segment. And really, we want to tackle why ambition isn't translating here. You know, a lot of organizations are talking about AI, but fewer are turning it into measurable value. We want to try to figure out why that is. Annette, you know, when a client has real AI ambition but isn't seeing value, what's usually behind that? Is it strategy, execution, or something unique to AI?
You nailed it, Derek. So the problem isn't really about the models themselves. It's always about closing the strategy to execution gap. So we do need to shift the conversation from AI to ROI and treat these initiatives as an enterprise business-driven transformation program that is focused on driving business outcomes. No different than any other transformation. It's just that the impact is bigger and broader. Another major roadblock is getting out of the pilot phase. This is often where companies stumble in the POC phase of a use case tied to AI. Often because of lack of a clear business case and difficulty in scaling the operating model. Operationalization and scale is a big nut to crack still for many organizations. Quality data foundations is another area that drives that gap, as well as workforce adoption and integrating into the real workflows. So, you know, behind all this, again, is organizational change management. It's key, like any transformation, and success is always going to be predicated on leadership alignment, governance, employee trust, and process design. So ultimately, the real area to focus on is bridging that gap between strategy and execution, because it's never And it's never about the technology, ever.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's really interesting that you point that out, Annette, because bridging that gap is vital for companies.
Right.
Is it going to be a leap from one building to another, or am I just walking across a hallway here? That's the vision of that. And Christina, when organizations stall, is the bigger issue the use case selection or the organization's readiness to support it? What conditions would you recommend be in place for AI to deliver value?
So I will follow through what Annette mentioned. Couldn't agree more that it's never the technology. So similar to here, it is also never about technology for this question. It's around organizational readiness and execution. And so it's never around lacking of brilliant use cases. We actually not lack of at all of great ideas, great problem statements, great opportunity statements. We get many of them every single day. It is around, then what do you do with it? How do you prioritize it? How is it aligning to your organizational value and the principle, the integrity of your business, and how do you actually execute it? I think that's usually where the obstacles are. So kudos to the business folks. Thank you for all the inputs. You guys have great use cases, great ideas. Now it's around working together across the organization around how to execute and make it real. I think there will be three areas. One is around data, and I cannot emphasize it enough, and Diane mentioned around the importance of that as well. So if data is a mess, your AI is a mess. And I do also believe that it does not mean the extreme of, well, then I need 5 years to clean up all my data and put in a new data platform and whatnot. It's not about bringing data to AI. It's around bringing AI to data. But you do need to have some foundational cleanliness in order to proceed with that. And the second part is change management, the people part that Annette highlighted, couldn't have agreed more, is transformational. The key part of it is around people, because you can have a tool in front of you. It is up to the human being how to actually use your solution, how to use the tool. It's fundamentally around trust. We have come across many situations that it is in front of them, but do you use it? Do you adapt it? Do you adopt it? Do you embrace it? It is a human decision. It's an individual decision. So if you don't use it, then value is zero. It's just collecting dust. And we have seen that. We have seen that even in early stage when tools, not even a solution or new workflow, new business process, just even a tool in front of people, it does not equate to they will use it. So how to really get people to trust it, to adapt, to adopt it in their day-to-day work is very important. I think number 3 is around ROI. And if you are doing it without understanding why you are doing it, what's the purpose of doing it, I don't think it's going to work either. So is it your value is around just productivity? Or is it around innovation, creating new products, services for your company, be more agile in your business operating model? It's around sustainability. Guess what? The developers need to know about what exactly we are trying to do and achieve before writing the first line of code, before writing the first line of specification to generate those code. So these ROIs, objectives, and purposes needs to be very clear upfront. So I think these 3 will be my recommendation.
Wow. Data hygiene and clarity to purpose. That's essentially what it boils down to. Thank you very much, Christina. I thought that was very eloquent. And Diane, what technical or policy factors are business leaders still underestimating when they try to scale AI?
Yeah, and I think, Annette and Christina have answered a lot of that, so I'm going to be pretty brief here. It's not a policy or a technical thing that's being underestimated. It's the need to shift our culture from one of very risk adverse to one of innovation. And with that comes the giving people permission to be efficient. And I've said it over and over again over the last couple of weeks, the number of times I've done something, and Annette, you and I were just talking about this, that you go, wow, that was too easy. Like, did I cheat? Like, no, I drove it. It's using my information, but that was too easy. It's shifting our mindset to that's okay, but it's not cheating to be efficient. It's cheating not to apply our own critical thinking, our own creativity, and to get lazy with the tools and let them take over. But it's okay to be efficient. So it's a culture of giving permission to innovate. That requires all the things you've heard here: the governance, the change management, the providing guardrails and a safe environment that you're able to use these things to see where is it going to bring you value. But to me, the biggest thing we're underestimating is that shift in our culture. We are a risk-averse, thoughtful culture. And if we're going to move to a more risk-taking, innovative culture, we need to create a safe environment to do that. We need to make sure all of those technology things are in place, that we're not risking leaking information, sharing something that shouldn't be shared, or over-relying on a tool, but build the framework to find that out. Where does it fit? Where do we get value?
Oh, very, very nice. Thank you for that light touch. I do appreciate it. Now, it's a really nice segue to our next segment, which is, really what it takes to scale. Moving from pilot to production is where a lot of AI efforts lose momentum. Christina, can you tell me, what does it actually take to scale?
I previously mentioned around having the centralized foundation and with a decentralized execution across different teams and geographies. I think that's the way to scale quickly. I talked about having the right AI guardrails and responsible use in place, because then all these what you can do, what you cannot do policies have already figured out upfront. So now you can laser focus on execution and acceleration. So I think those are important too. Some examples of that, how we do the life cycle, like look through the life cycle of an AI and make sure that you actually have processes mapped to it. As simple as funding. So a lot of times a project is a CapEx, one-time expense. And I mentioned it around AI in order to be responsible, in order to avoid biases. You need to also to have really good AI ops. You need to have that diverse team that we just mentioned. And that is ongoing operating costs of OpEx. So all these costs will need to be factored in, which previously you may not be, your finance team or even your solution team or your operating team may not be very familiar with how to do that. And recently I was talking to a business group and they were asking me a really good question because they take accountability. They said, Christina, after I put my agentic solution in production go live, what is my continuing responsibility of that? Because in the past, after a system is built, it's all IT thing, like IT keep the lights on. But is it still the same when it is an agentic solution in the future? So these are all different types of changes in operating model, accountabilities, roles that it may be foreign to them from before. And these needs to be all taken care of in order for you to move from pilot to production, in order for you to scale quickly. My personal feedback also is I will not suggest a company to go big bang into all your 11 line of business to go together. I would suggest that to go focus in particular area, do it very well, and then have that lessons learned, and then so you can scale it more quickly. Because 11 teams doing it at the same time, sometimes it can be chaotic, and sometimes it is difficult to learn from each other. So I would say that pick a couple, double down on those investments, do it very well, can also another way to accelerate time to value.
Thank you for that. Question from Paula. And Diane, I'll direct this one to you. Earlier, of course, you talked about AI guardrails and accelerating innovation instead of slowing it down. So what's the difference between a guardrail that empowers people versus one that quietly kills creativity?
Yeah, the quick answer to that question is permission. We're setting guardrails that give permission, that enable us to be able to use the tools. Here's a tool, and this is its use, right? The challenge that we've had at CGI and with organizations we work with is most of the solutions we've had up until now have been fit for purpose. We have a tool that does diagnostic imaging. We have a tool that does predictive maintenance in manufacturing, and it's got a set purpose. Now we're rolling out tools that are a black box that have unlimited uses. We need to say, in the context of our business, we are providing you this license, and this is your contract with us on your responsible use of technology. We saw that when the internet rolled out, when we started rolling out laptops. This is my contract with you. If you're going to use this asset, this is our contract on how you're going to use it. And that's the key. You know, I am going to have a tool that's going to enable me to do a range of things that's going to make my life easier. I'm not going to use it for this. You know, and that is giving people permission then to innovate, as we were talking earlier. So, you know, we're finding not just in AI, but cybersecurity, other areas, these policies are now being put in place so that we can enable people and make sure that it's clear what the expectation is.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to our next segment, because I think it's important when we're talking about moving forward and going north on this, that, you know, what essentially is the cost of moving too slowly. You know, and Annette, I'd love to get your perspective on it, because, you know, what are the organizations pulling ahead doing differently right now? What does real leadership look like in this moment?
So when we look at how to scale AI successfully, you know, a lot of the focus needs to be on organizational readiness and culture. A lot of what I'm going to say next is a bit of a repeat, but we do need to come at it from a business perspective and at an enterprise level. So business transformation, not technology project, executive sponsorship, clear business priorities, that is key. Investment in the data foundation and responsible governance is key. Ensuring that there is cross-functional collaboration and that we are embedding AI into the daily work and the operating model is key. Investing in change management, employee training, and workforce adoption strategies is key. Looking at it from a human-centric design lens, both from an employee and a client experience perspective, also key. And lastly, as much as it's a transformation, we do need to look at it from a test and learn approach with a focus on driving incremental value and continuous improvement, because it doesn't go away when you're done, when you're deployed, when you deployed it. It's going to be a constant learning approach. And as much as we talk about the data foundation layer, yes, we need to set the stage for the data foundation, but we cannot wait till all that is complete to start. So even that needs to be addressed in an incremental way for there to be progress. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Annette. I appreciate that. Christina, where do you see the competitive gap opening up most clearly? Is it by sector, by geography, or by organizational readiness?
I piggyback with what Annette said. 100% is around organizational readiness and culture. I think it's much more than geography or even industry sector. The gap we are seeing isn't really just between, like, let's say, are you a tech company? Are you a more traditional old style company? And it is like, we see the difference when there is an agile incumbent and a very rigid incumbent within the same industry. So we don't see it necessarily difference between industry. We see that actually within the same industry, and it's based on the nature of your organizational readiness, such as, are you agile enough, lowercase of the A, or are you too rigid in adapting and adopting these changes? So another example, what I'm seeing, the gap is really opening up in competitive advantages is, if a company treats AI as a project, as a checklist, saying that, hey, everybody, you need to have at least one AI project, and like, show it to me how you're doing it. So if you treat it so transactional and just saying more as a performative language, and so that you can tell other people saying, hey, I'm using AI too, that is not going to be successful. And you will be falling behind comparing to those companies that really treating AI as an advantage, as a benefit to transform your business and creating it as a value proposition that is unique to you. So it is right now racing to that destination. So if you are not acting right now, and if you are not evolving your company right now, you'll be quickly falling behind.
Great perspective. Thank you very much, Christina. I'm going to move on to our final block right now, and I think it's important to look at one last question and one thing from each of you, short, specific, and actionable. And this is the question for each of you to answer. And Annette, I'd love to begin with you. What should a business leader do differently on Monday morning?
Well, they need to start treating AI as a core operational capability and identifying some high impact workflows where AI can improve productivity, decision-making, customer experience, and speed to market.
Christina, same question to you. What should a business leader do differently on Monday morning?
They should sleep in. No, I'm just kidding. That's an inside voice. We didn't record it. So what I think they should be doing is they meet with the team. They should really continuously looking into their portfolio of their AI portfolio. As a business leader, you need to make sure your accountability is to make sure that what you are doing and investing your team's time on is continuously aligning back to the business objective and the KPI. And also taking a look, are these initiatives, do they have a clear path to scale? Because if not, you may be going against an uphill battle. So I would say, if you're a business leader, look at it every Monday with your team. Are you investing your time on the right thing?
Great. Diane?
Okay, people need to stop talking about AI. and I don't mean that facetiously. We need to stop looking for problems that we can throw AI at. And we need to look at, what do we now have a really cool new tool in our toolbox that we can solve strategic problems. We can look at, how do we change within our industry. So let's stop talking about AI. Let's start talking about, what can we solve now that's going to increase revenue, reduce risk, increase the satisfaction of their employees and citizen personalization, and stop talking about AI. And it's funny, we had a meeting with clients, and I challenged our AI lead in Canada that from now on we're going to do these and never use the words AI.
That's wonderful. And we've had so many conversations about that. Let's solve some problems. Let's fix things. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Stop talking about AI.
Yeah, no, for sure. Listen, Diane, Christina, and Annette, thank you very much. Wonderful perspectives and insights. Thank you for sharing today. Of course, this conversation is also the final part of CGI's Women in Tech series. For more, we invite you to follow CGI on LinkedIn and visit CGI.com. I'm Derek Marinos, and thank you for joining us. Bye for now.